I want to talk about the Gregg Wallace saga that has been going on for the past week solid now.
Why?
Because I don't know who Gregg Wallace is. And they're all like, oh, look at this evil man. And I'm like, okay, all right, okay. And so, like, it's like, oh, evil man. I was like, oh, okay, what did this BBC presenter do? And
Nothing as bad as the other BBC presenters?
yeah, they seem to be most annoyed that he's interested in adult human females, which is literally the entire allegation against him. By the way.
Okay. He acted ungentlemanly in the workplace.
Yeah, we'll cover it in some autistic detail because I just want to show people just how this isn't really news, right? What this is something that should have been dealt with internally and not really our problem. And also, essentially, Gregg Wallace's crime is being cringe.
Yes.
That is his crime. And also being a working class cringe boomer. He's not actually a boomer, he's Gen X, but spiritually a working class boomer against the Love Actually women of the early 2000s.
Glamour feminists.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
You mean Keira Knightley?
The sort of bourgeois feminism of the early 2000s, right? Where you've got a kind of level of appropriateness that they expect. It's very bourgeois. It's very...
You say that. The same sort of class of women who expect this level of appropriateness from Gregg Wallace, and they promote loose women, they promote Lorraine Kelly.
Yeah, but that's all fine because that's done by women.
I know, yeah.
When it's done by a man, then it's a problem, especially a working class man.
I kind of agree because of the physical differentiation, but they don't agree because they want to level all sex differences.
Yeah, but and they also want to make it so that a man can never be sexually forward, which is fine. And to be honest with you, like I said, I find Gregg Wallace's behaviour really cringe.
Yep.
But the thing is, the question is, like, is it criminal? No, it doesn't appear to be. Is it inappropriate? Well, given it was the BBC, he seems to have been rather tepid.
Yeah, he's no Hugh Edwards.
He's no Jimmy Savile. And what's the guy who raped all the dogs to death?
What?
Yeah, the vet. Was it he?
Yeah, there was a BBC presenter who raped like 39 dogs to death. Did you not see that? It was only fairly recently as well.
Poor dogs.
I could have lived without knowing this, actually.
Yeah, and so, like, Gregg Wallace has been a bit cringe towards women who weren't interested in his advances. Yeah, I agree that's not great. But let's be honest, the BBC has just got such worse skeletons in the cupboard. But anyway, so yeah, Gregg Wallace. I didn't know who he was, right? Because I don't watch, like, normie TV.
He was the greengrocer that's the co-presenter on MasterChef.
Yeah, he's the co-presenter on MasterChef. And he's done a bunch of other things as well. Like, as you can see, he's had a long broadcasting career. And he's a Londoner. He's from...
Peckham, isn't it?
Peckham, yeah. And, he's a Londoner from the 1960s. So he is a little bit of a dinosaur in the age of the new men.
The important thing to note about this that I was going to bring up, because I found out about this via cultural osmosis, because this has, if you're in Britain, been the headline for a week.
Yeah.
He said in his biography that when he was 8 years old, he was sexually abused. Yep. So I think that this unhealthy relationship to sexual boundaries might have stemmed from somewhere.
Entirely possible. I'm not in a position to psychoanalyze him, but that does seem something that may be a contributing factor to this. But as you can see, he sold vegetables at a stand in Covent Garden before becoming a salesman, and so there's a kind of working class London stereotype, which is a kind of loud,
the Barrow Boy, the sort of bantering.
I don't know how to describe it, really. Like
Cockney cheeky chappy.
Yeah, Cockney cheeky chappy, yeah. And that's the kind of stereotype that Gregg fits into. And that stereotype became superseded in about 2000 when a bunch of bourgeois cosmopolitan men took over in the Blairite administration and instantiated a new kind of overculture in which no one's allowed to be a cheeky chappy because that's... I was going to say racism. In some ways it is racism. But also it's a sexism. Gregg has done a lot of sexisms.
If people have seen Love Actually, the kind of person they're talking about is Hugh Grant, who's sort of bumbling and apologetic about his innuendos at the very least.
Yeah. But Gregg Wallace... but that's the thing. Hugh Grant being the avatar of a bourgeois man, Gregg Wallace is a working class man, and so he is tactless, I think we can say, at best. And so anyway, he's been popular because... The other side of the cheeky chappy is he's funny and endearing and people like him. He's a fun guy to be around. And so he's been really popular. I mean, he did earlier this year, in fact. Gregg Wallace had done like a Perfect Saturday show where basically he just explains what his Perfect Saturday is. And on Gregg's, it's just like, well, I get up really early, I read some of my book, I go to the gym, I have lunch at like 10 o'clock or something. It was really early, 10:30 a.m. And then I go and spend some time with my kids. I'll go home and play a strategy game in the afternoon for a couple of hours. Then I'll be in bed by 9 o'clock and it'll just be a really boring day. And everyone, for some reason, took exception to this. And this guy's like, I interviewed Gregg. I really liked him. He's a really charming dude, blah, 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 right? And there's a lot of discourse about this in like the normie space. So the problem with Gregg Wallace, right? He was too honest. He was just too honest about how his day went. And it's just like, okay, but I mean, I don't know. I've never watched anything with him in. I don't know anything about him. And this is the kind of discourse they're having before all of this happens. You've got like people like Janice Reporter who's like, oh God, why do they love him so much? He's always on TV. He's their token working class hero. And it's like, okay, you can see the discourse surrounding it.
Of all the people, Janet Street Porter said this. I mean, she's the insufferable harpy on loose women.
I know.
I'm just curious, what did he say? Because
we'll
constantly hear the name.
Yeah, we'll get to it. But anyway, and Gregg Wallace, so generally he was a man of standing in this.
Sorry, the dark mode has made Janet Street Porter look like some sort of interdimensional goblin.
Yes, that's correct. But also something to do with the dark mode. But the point is, she's a middle-class woman of a certain age complaining that, I don't like this shouty bloke being this token working-class hero because he is a popular man within this milieu. He was given an MBE a few years ago, and of course he thinks of himself as deserving of a statue because he saved the nation from obesity. It's like, okay, well, again, I don't know who this guy is, but he seems to be relatively well liked in his social sphere. He seems to have had a successful career. He's that kind of, Peckham cheeky chappy type. You get what you get with that kind of guy.
Save the nation from obesity.
Oh, apparently.
We've got really high rates of child obesity.
Yeah, I know. I didn't think he'd won that bad.
Connor, they would be higher if it weren't for him.
Yeah.
Obesity 1, Gregg and Wallace 0.
Yeah, but, it's whatever, right? The point being, he's a known property in this industry, and someone working for the BBC, he didn't seem that bad, but there is a certain kind of middle-class, middle-aged woman who doesn't like this kind of man, because this kind of man isn't as respecting of boundaries as the kind of who's the other guy in Love Actually?
That doesn't narrow it down.
Liam Neeson.
No.
You mean
what's
Rick from Walking Dead,
no.
who was showing her the cards?
Who's the guy in Bridget Jones?
Oh, Colin Firth.
Colin Firth.
The other one.
No, that is Hugh Grant. It's Hugh Grant and Colin Firth.
Right, yeah, Colin Firth. The sort of Colin Firth types and the Hugh Grant types all fine because they're non-threatening.
Well, Bridget Jones is the sort of the Pride and Prejudice recast dream for that kind of woman.
Absolutely is, yeah. But they're the kind of acceptable men from the bourgeois feminist position.
Yes.
Because they're non-threatening. Right, Gregg Wallace,
or because those women liked them, found them attractive.
They do like them. Yeah,
there's compliments sometimes when
it's not just that they do find them attractive, but they find them non-threatening, right? Because these men fundamentally agree with the kind of feminist propositions on how male-female interaction should be. Gregg Wallace comes from a different kind of class, a different kind of culture that is more about being aggressive with your own boundaries.
You can also believe that Gregg Wallace could handle himself in a scrap, whereas the two characters in Bridget Jones, the entire running joke is the street fights that they have are embarrassing.
Yeah. And so, anyway, Gregg Wallace has had a fairly long history, really, of saying things that certain types of people don't like. For example, he presented a show called Inside the Factory a few years ago, which was just him going around factories and saying, "Oh, look at this! This is how this works," right? And he was encouraged. He decided to quit this. What?
Look at this accident! This guy here got chopped to death.
Well, the factories weren't quite that exciting.
21st century Friedrich Engels, is it?
We don't have factories that do anything that magnificent. We package yogurts and stuff. One of the complaints was from a
That's glorious.
I'm not even joking.
Right.
Right, but during the visit, Wallace allegedly made comments to staff that were considered inappropriate. The publication understands that remarks were related to the weight of female staff members and were not sexual. So he wasn't sexually harassing anyone, he was calling them fat.
Quite the opposite, in fact.
Yeah. Anyway, so that was back in 2023, May 2023, and so, some sensitive souls were like, how dare you call me fat? You're fired. And then we begin in October, where he had to deny a series of inappropriate sexual comments. It's like, okay, all right, I can see where this is going. So he was reported to the BBC bosses after he was accused of taking his top off and boasting about his sex life to a woman on the show Impossible Celebrities in 2018. He posted on Instagram that this was not true. He hadn't said anything sexual. And the BBC said, quote, "It does not tolerate any form of inappropriate behaviour and has robust processes in place." So that suggests that they didn't find Jimmy Savile inappropriate.
Or Hugh Edwards.
Or the guy who raped all the dogs to death. But no, Gregg Wallace took his shirt off and said something about his sex life between two consenting adults, and the BBC were like, not on our bloody watch. How dare you, sir? And one source who reported on this to the BBC said, quote, "Gregg appeared to think it was all just banter, and also said to have made some comments in front of the live audience." And were they all like, oh my god? No, they all laughed. Because as far as he was concerned, it was just banter. Because he is a Peckham cheeky chappy and not a Love Actually Bridget Jones type guy.
Well, okay, let's say rough and rugged heterosexual white men in particular are the public enemy number one of the current social order.
Yeah.
And especially after Me Too, where for decades they tolerated actual sexual assaults in Hollywood, in media. Jimmy Savile's sort of around but not directly implicated in this. They've then leaped to a now puritanical, very prudent, prudish, not prudent, crusade against language, as if language leads ineluctably to rape.
Yeah.
And so now he's fallen on the wrong side of this.
Yes, and this was probably a long time coming because of the kind of person that he is and the kind of environment that he's operating in and the kind of environment it has become. But anyway, so he stepped away from presenting MasterChef after denying inappropriate sexual comments in, I think this is in November, let me just check. October, sorry. In the next one, actually. There we go. In November, because of allegations of historical misconduct. So the BBC News sent a letter to his representatives letting him know about allegations of inappropriate sexual comments by 13 people who worked with him across a range of shows over a 17-year period.
Well, this is 17-year period, and again, he's denied this through his legal team. I've got no opinion on it one way or the other, but he's a 60-year-old man.
Yeah.
Throughout his life, what have been the characters in British films and sitcoms? It's been the Carry-Ons, it's been Red Dwarf, it's been men behaving badly. So, Lads Mags in the 90s. So, are these not the expectations that were set for him, or at least a certain type of man? And then when it switches on a dime with Me Too, they then get sucked into the language policing orbit.
Yeah, that's what's happened.
Right.
And he comes from a culture where people are expected to more aggressively assert their own boundaries, right? This is just what, especially in sort of working class London culture before it got diversified out of existence. I found it surprising how firm you would have to be with these people. It's not that they were doing anything wrong, it's just they weren't as respectful of other people's boundaries as you would expect. And honestly, like Gregg Wallace making sexualized jokes to women who are obviously not interested, complete cringe. I don't endorse it at all. I think it's gross. And so I am with them on that. But the question is, are these crimes? Are these things that he needs to have his entire career stripped from him? Do we need to drag his name through the mud? Well, I mean, these people do think so, right? So, anyway, apparently Wallace would tell stories and jokes of, quote, a sexualized nature in front of contestants and crew.
I mean, that's very abstract. What did
exactly?
Do we know what did he say?
No,
there are all sorts of
in
things.
Every case, anyway. A lot of but that's the point. They're trying to abstract away from what he actually said to make it sound like he was essentially saying, I'm going to do something terrible to you, rather than just making a cringe and inappropriate joke, right? And that's what this seems to be, right? She carries on. I think people were uncomfortable, but we were essentially a captive audience. People looked embarrassed and just got on with their work. Yes, he was cringe. Right, okay, I agree. I agree that he was cringe.
Hang on a minute. So if it was that outrageous, again, very different to the culture that I grew up with, because actually my grandparents are both from that area.
Yeah, I know.
Thanks.
Well, no, it's fine. Well, that's why I'm glad that you're here.
Yeah.
Because you know exactly the kind of culture I'm talking about.
Yeah, as a kid, I wasn't used to this. You got wound up something chronic, and it took me a long time to adjust to it.
Yeah.
So that's why you grow a slightly thicker skin.
Yeah.
But wouldn't you just turn around and say, "Well, come on, mate, really?
Yeah.
Like, cut it out a bit."
Yeah. I mean, and you don't have to, but you could and probably should, frankly.
Rather than harbour it for years.
Anyway, so let's go through the actual allegations, just because these are just mental, right? So, one person claims that Wallace was openly talking about his sex life, taking off his top in front of a female worker, saying he wanted to give her a fashion show, and telling a junior female colleague that he wasn't wearing any box shorts under his jeans. Okay, all of them are gross and like cringe again, but okay, what now? What do you want us to do about this? Like, what's the demand that comes of this, right? Many accusations span back over the last decade. Some back as far as 19 years, right? One of the women calls him, says that he sexually harassed her, quote unquote, describing him as disgusting and repulsive. Again, it seems to be about making the jokes. And she also called him racist because he impersonated an Indian accent in front of a staff member who's Indian. Sounds like he was just joking around, mate.
Yeah.
And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he wasn't cringe. Like, it seems like he was, but,
Being cringe is not a crime.
Yeah, I mean, presenter Kirsty Allsop says, within 1 hour of meeting Gregg Wallace, he told me of a sex act that he and his partner at the time enjoyed every morning, just after she'd left the room when we were filming a pilot. Did he get off on how embarrassed I was? It was totally unprofessional. That was like from 2012 or something, that allegation. It's like, yeah, it's unprofessional and embarrassing.
Did she also report it internally at the time?
No.
So I know some people
did, but that's not.
Which is the BBC's failure to follow up on. But,
Sure.
but again, what's the motivation of now coming out of the woodwork to get your 5 minutes?
We'll get to that in a minute. So, actor and author Emma Kennedy complained that he had apparently touched another woman's bottom. So, the woman he touched hasn't leveled the complaint. She's leveled the complaint, and what she says is, I think he touched her because she did react, but I cannot be 100% certain that he did touch her because a female assistant was bending over and he went core with his hands over her ass.
Right, so a carry-on joke.
A carry-on
Which,
joke.
again,
Which
cringe.
Yeah, embarrassing, and you definitely should not do. But if the woman who apparently he touched, even though he's not sure he touched someone, it is inappropriate, I agree. But, like, do we need to hear about him for a week solid?
It's an entire
over this?
non-story.
Like this, yeah, exactly. This is just not really interesting.
The BBC did not dedicate the same coverage to the recent grooming gang prosecutions where they got over 100 years in prison.
Things, and yet all we've seen for this week is this, right? So the Sunday Times reported that the BBC, an executive, told Wallace that his behaviour was unacceptable and cannot continue after complaints were made by the broadcaster Azar Mir, who appeared on the 12th series of Celebrity MasterChef. And two of the women who complained about the BBC told staff that he made them feel uncomfortable by talking about his sex life and making disgusting sexual jokes. Yes, the gross, I agree. I wouldn't be comfortable either. Now what? Like, don't keep hiring him, I guess. I don't know, but that was, again, back in 2018. In 2022, a letter containing several allegations of inappropriate behaviour by Wallace was sent to the BBC, but did not prompt further investigation at the time. They were probably thinking, well, no, I'm not going to make jokes about those. But and there are a few others who just said that he made highly inappropriate comments about sex, made lesbian jokes, and was fascinated with her relationships with women. It's like, okay, yeah, he's a really embarrassing uncle, basically.
Yeah.
That's basically the summary of all this. Anyway, and so Wallace came out and was like, well, yeah, my accusers are a handful of middle-class women of a certain age, and that it's...
This was a full-on minefield that he jumped with both feet on.
Yes. But this was also an accurate characterization of who the accusers were, actually. But he says there have been 13 complaints over 17 years, where he's had 4,000 contestants. and none of them seem to actually be saying he did anything physical to touch them or harm them or something like that. Basically, he's got bad vibes, and he makes them feel uncomfortable. It's like,
They don't like the cut of his jib.
yeah, they don't. And
He
that's
gives
what-
them the ick
Yeah.
because he isn't funny.
Yeah, and he's not like, sexy or something. And so it's just like they don't want him coming onto them, basically. And it's like, yeah, that's grim.
But it doesn't even sound like he was actually coming onto them.
Yeah.
Those weren't the allegations. It was just that he was actually making jokes about his wife.
Yeah. Anyway, they cancelled his Christmas special over this, and one of his co-stars is gutted about it. But I think this is really what it was all building towards. It's like, look, he is an influential man who we don't like because he gives us the ick. Let's get rid of him. And it seems to be a kind of middle-aged feminist conspiracy against him to say that he made us feel gross. It's like, yeah, okay.
You are right in that it's
You work
bourgeois
for-
because they are not concerned about any actual issues of material
harm at
scarcity or survival. It's just
And also,
appropriateness.
you work for the BBC. You work for an institutionally noncy organisation, and you're like, yeah, but this working class guy made a joke about like sex. It's like, okay, yeah, but he made a joke about sex with adult women. You literally work or have worked with or are in the same institution as literal paedophiles. So just saying, sorry, he's giving you the ick. Anyway, moving on. Melanie Sykes was like, I had a jaw-dropping encounter with Gregg Wallace. Made me quit TV entirely. It's like, God, what did he do?
What did he say?
No, take a guess. Take a guess of what he did.
Can you scroll down?
No, I want you to guess.
What's Melanie Sykes look like?
Well, she was
He
a
called
former
her
model.
a frisky lass.
She's a former model, right?
Right. Okay.
Go on, called her a frisky lass?
Yeah.
What do you reckon? How bad was this
Did he make a racist joke? Is she a
Right? Okay, let's find out. Wallace asked her as she walked onto the set, quote, whether models eat. Because models are very skinny. And Gregg Wallace is not very skinny. And so he's like, well, do models even eat? And she's like, oh, jaw-dropping. It made me decide to quit the TV industry once and for all.
Good.
Gave
How
him
will she
anorexia.
recover? This is pathetic. This is absolutely pathetic. Now, the possibly the worst one is this one, right? So one MasterChef contestant accused Gregg Wallace of thrusting his groin in her face 3 times as she crouched in front of an oven. And this person from 2009 said that he carried out the disturbing act while making a sick joke about her father's meat.
So hang on a minute. Edited out of the show implies there is footage. The BBC retain all their footage in
They
archives.
do get the footage. Let's see it.
So he's denied this with his lawyers.
Yeah.
So shouldn't this be easy to either prove or disprove?
You'd think so. Again, it's all very recent. This is a very breaking news.
Overcompensation.
Yeah.
Could you have sent a legal request to the BBC to procure the footage?
I'm sure his lawyers could.
So why is anyone reporting on this?
I don't know. Because this is a smear job. This is about trying to tear down an icon of masculinity, even though I use that in inverted commas. I don't consider him an icon of masculinity. Like I said, I consider him really embarrassing. And I agree that with these women, he's embarrassing. Don't work with him.
But he's an avatar of the blokish order.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He's one of the working class men behaving badly, and we need to stamp that down. There are some more allegations, which I take with less seriousness, because we are given women without their real names.
So it's like the sort of Russell Brand thing.
Yeah. I think a core component of justice is being able to face your accuser.
Yes.
And if someone's making an accusation behind a pseudonym, I don't really take that very seriously then. You've got to put your name to the allegation because it's a serious thing. Right. Lisa, not her real name, worked for the BBC's show Just Eat Well for Less or something in 2015, and apparently he touched her inappropriately when they were filming in a supermarket. He brushed past me in the checkout and touched my bum with his waist and penis and laughed, "Ooh, you like that, didn't you?" It was the way he reacted. Other people would have said, "Oh, I'm sorry, can I squeeze by?" Again, very much class distinction here.
But also, okay, so two things there. You're describing, and again, if this is true, yeah, damning. I've not got any actual evidence of this yet, but fine. You're describing a sequence of disconnected events. It could have just been that he brushed past you and then made a joke about brushing past you.
Yes.
It's not that he deliberately tried to make him
what
grinding
she's-
up against you.
Yeah, no, that's what she's accusing. She's not saying that he grabbed her hips and ground against her or anything like that. What he's saying is, like, you know when you're on a train and you have to brush past someone,
Yeah.
right? and you're uncomfortably close to them, right? But the differences in culture, in bourgeois, middle class, sort of new man culture, you have to be very apologetic. Oh, sorry. But in working class, sort of Peckham, wide boy culture, you make an excessive joke about anything that happens. Yeah. And this, honestly, is why I've never really wanted to date a London woman, right? And I'm not even trying to throw shade, but like, it's just very loud culture that comes at you, and it's not for me. And I'm not saying London women are attractive or anything like that. It's just there's a kind of effervescence to it that's just.
I can hear my ex-girlfriend's voice in my ear right now.
and that's the sort of thing they do to cover up when they're feeling embarrassed, right? When there's some social inappropriateness or interaction that no one's really happy with, they make it more so you can laugh at it and move on.
Trying to diffuse the tension.
Exactly, to diffuse tension. That's what he's, I think, obviously trying to do there. But she, as a middle-class woman, is just like, oh my God, it's worse, than you can. And so she's like, I felt slimy. It's like, yeah, okay, I agree. I can understand why. But like, I don't think it's what you mean.
It wasn't predatory. It was just cringe.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't predatory. It seems it was just cringe.
I think it's overcompensation. The BBC, most probably, they want to just seem that they're cracking really hard on it.
Sanitize their image.
Yeah. So they say, for instance, you're never gonna sing "I touch myself in an elevator" by the Divinyls. Because it's going to be cringe.
But can we go on? Because some of these are just even more stupid. So Anna worked on, not her real name again, worked on MasterChef in 2015, and she was called to his dressing room, and he wasn't properly dressed, and she could see like his pubic hair, and the top part of his thing, and she was like, "Oh, he stared at me, and I felt embarrassed, and I left." It's like, okay.
So then the question would be, did you just walk in on him at an inopportune time?
Yeah.
Or
I don't know.
Was it arranged?
Yeah.
And no more details are provided.
Well, they say, quote, she was called in, but it doesn't say by him. Right? So, it could have been the producer and like, no, go and get Gregg ready or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, we need more details.
Yeah, we don't know. But she felt embarrassed, which, it seems embarrassing. And then there's a woman called Sarah, not her real name, says that... Wallace asked her to take him to the car park, and as we walked down, he put his arm around me and said, "Go on, hold my hand. Don't you want to stand next to me?" It was totally out of the blue and totally unwanted. Yeah, okay, but that's not him doing anything other than making an attempt at a woman and her going, "No, I'm not interested, thank you."
Yeah.
Like, it's cringe. What are you doing, Gregg? But like, anyway, he left one woman crying because he, quote, made innuendos constantly during filming. And made sexually inappropriate comments that left her in tears. Like, yeah, okay. I don't like. She said there's no way other people did not hear Wallace's innuendos constantly throughout filming, and that it was put down to lad culture and banter. It's just banter. If it's just banter and fun, then why am I crying in the toilet? It's like,
it's immediately envisioned a soy jack.
Yeah, well, that's. It's just, look, I agree. I'm not really a big fan of that kind of sexualized banter culture either. I do find it cringe, and I can totally see why you wouldn't want to be a part of it. And it would be nice if those sort of people would knock it off. But again, this has been the main headline all week.
But also the sentence, if they're having fun, then why am I crying? It's just...
Yeah, basically.
Really?
There's a complaint from Nestle because there was a memo shared on the company intranet that said the experience of some of the team taking part in the film had not been a pleasant one. And that compromised Nestle's values. Anyway, so he apologizes for the middle class women comment. He said, "Look, I apologize for any offense I caused with the post yesterday. Any upset I may have caused a lot of people. I wasn't in a good headspace when I posted it. I've been under a huge amount of stress, a lot of emotion, and you can see why after 3 or 4 days of non-stop. By the way, we're not going to say that Gregg Wallace is a rapist, but we are going to imply Gregg Wallace is a rapist, even though there's no actual allegations of any real physical wrongdoing. It's all just we don't like his personality." It's like, yeah, okay, maybe you don't. I'm sure lots of middle-class women don't. But he said, "I felt very alone under siege yesterday when I posted it," and says, "It's obvious to me I need to take some time out while this investigation is underway. I hope you understand, and I do hope you'll accept this apology." But it seems like an unreserved apology.
Yeah.
So
they won't accept it?
Of course not. The first thing one of his accusers said, he certainly hasn't learned his lesson and seems to be saying he's the victim of classism. Well, honestly, I think he might be the victim of classism, actually. But I don't know what else he needs to do to apologise then, because that seemed to be an unreserved apology. And, okay, I mean, whatever. Ulrika Johnson said that he made a rape joke during her time on Celebrity MasterChef and told the Daily Telegraph that she felt Wallace's response showed the arrogance of a man who has zero introspection or self-awareness.
Is the joke detailed in the article?
No.
Oh.
So I'm just going to take their word for it because I don't think any of them would be misrepresenting any of this. When he made a reference to women of a certain age, I was just seething. I was absolutely wild. It's like, it's 'cause you resembled that characterization, wasn't it? That's the thing. And then finally, his ghostwriter has alleged sexual harassment. Shannon Kyle.
In what sense?
He apparently once answered the door wearing a towel, which he later dropped, made revolting and sickening sexualized suggestions to her, and touched her inappropriately. He once touched her on the thigh when she was sitting in the passenger seat of his sports car, and felt her bottom after he appeared on the Good Food Show in Birmingham. And she described it as... So this is the worst allegation.
Yeah, if any of those things are true, they're grim. But
yeah,
why weren't they also reported to the authorities at the time?
Yeah, that's a great question. Because she was working for him, remember? And so this was in 2012. And she described them, his sexual innuendos, as word grenades that he would put out to get a response from her. It's like, yeah, I think he was hitting on you. And you should have told him that you're not interested. You should have been more proactive with your own boundaries, is what people are saying. But yeah, again, if any of those things are true, you really should have raised them at the time, and you should have gone to the police. If he actually did grope you, absolutely. But anyway, obviously his co-hosts are like, yeah, well, we pointed out that his boisterous behaviour was not something that everyone liked, but the BBC didn't do anything about it, and there was nothing that we could do. And so basically, this is what it seems to come down to. A bunch of the kind of culturally distinct classes in this country have been interacting, and they don't like each other. That's what I think this has come down to. I don't think he's done anything very bad, at least from the allegations. I don't know anything about Gregg Wallace or anything. Like I said, I've never watched anything that he's been in. But it seems that there's a certain level of viciousness here that's being latched onto by middle-class women of a certain age. And I think that's most well shown by the Melanie Sykes one. Do models even eat?
Well, I think the viciousness is shown by the fact that this has been, if you're in the UK, the leading news story for over a week, and I'm so tired of it when we have actual child grooming gangs still operating in this country.
I spent all morning figuring out what the hell I'm being bombarded with Gregg Wallace for, because it's just he said something I didn't like, and okay, where's the crime? What's the crime? And there are things that may be crimes, but they
weren't reported as crimes.
They weren't reported at the time as crimes, and often they're coming from people who are anonymous. And it's like, okay, but what do you want me to do with this information? And the answer just seems to be just dislike Gregg Wallace. Just dislike him. That's what we want. We want him to be booed and shunned. And it's like, okay, but I really hate this kind of gross character assassination form of dealing with problems. I'd rather deal with problems openly. This is just a very, very gross, insidious way of doing it. And I think I don't like it at all. But I'm not saying I like Gregg Wallace either. I think the way Gregg Wallace behaves is just embarrassing. It is totally embarrassing. Greg, knock it off, obviously.
I hope you appreciated that segment from the podcast, The Lotus Eaters, and if you want to see what else we're up to, you can always watch us have fun in Lads Hour, where we sort of are a bit laid back, have a bit of fun, and if you want to see all the other things that we're up to, you can always follow us on Twitter. Thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.